Hey, hello, what's up everyone? Welcome back to some tier list review. We're doing Path of Radiance today. I am Mekkah, and joining me here today to help me out, figure out stuff that I don't know about, and make sure I don't say anything really stupid, just moderately stupid, is Typhoon Carter. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. It's quite late, but I'm glad to be here.
That's good. Typhoon, some people might not know you, so would you mind elaborating a little bit on your experience with FE9? You know, why you like it, what ways have you played it? How good are you at the game? How elitist are you?
Okay, so FE9, I've definitely played my fair share of FE9. I recently did an LTC, 100% gross on hard mode for FE9, and let's just say there's definitely some interesting things about FE9 that I feel is rather underexplored for the most part.
Okay, and I've also been doing a little bit of FE9ing. I've played the run in the bottom right. Hopefully I'll remember to edit it in. I would be very ashamed if I did not. I've been playing my own, I would call it like an unplanned LTC/efficient run. Kind of the same run I did for FE8 that you saw in the FE8 tier list review I did with Jumpy, where I'd be trying to go through the game fast, but I wouldn't bother with planning. I just kind of pick units and distribute resources in a way that I thought would be efficient, and just kind of going through. And that's roughly the context that I want to use for tiering these characters, which means English version, hard mode, not maniac mode, Japanese, just to make that clear. And the run I played is on fixed growths, so no character gets like extremely screwed or blessed. They end up roughly around their averages.
Unless you're a madman like Gordon and do EV training.
Oh yeah, if you change what weapons you use and you change what type of enemies you fight, there are little differences that add up over time, kind of like the way that the bands add up, but if you don't pay attention to them, they should average out roughly. So my characters will roughly be around average stats. So what I did for that run, real brief, is just I saved resources like Bex and stat boosters for Marcia, and she was going to be the carry who does most of the work. And other than that, I just used units that I thought would be helpful, or I tried using them. So I gave some XP to like Soren, and I gave some XP to Oscar. I tried to use other characters, but basically I was trying to go as fast as I could without meticulously planning for it. So that's roughly the context I want to use for this. So not hard LTC, but just playing efficiently, because we need some kind of standards to judge units by. And the characters you see on the screen right now, they have already been tiered if you haven't noticed already, because these are what I did for my big tier list. And I've changed my opinions on quite a couple of units ever since I did that initial tiering. Those are mostly made off of memory and off of playing the games long ago. And ever since I've played FE9 like 1.5 more times, and I have Typhoon with me, so you can expect some units to change drastically, and some units might just stay in the same place. These units have been requested long ago by my Patreons, who want to give a quick shoutouts to, because thank you so much for supporting me and submitting these characters. This has been complete for a while, but it doesn't mean we can't, discuss these characters, analyze them in a little bit more depth. So yeah, we're gonna go through them from start to finish. I guess there was something about context that I wanted to add, but I forgot.
Yeah.
Have we established everything? I don't think so.
Yeah,
right?
we did. Not quite, but for the most part, I think we can assume that for a lot of the early to mid game, like a lot of the turn requirements for getting like the maximum Bex is usually fairly lenient. So I think that's usually a pretty good guideline. It's usually the late game where like it's a little bit too lenient. So like those would be a little bit tighter, I guess, for like context per se.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
But yeah, for the early game, you mostly just meet requirements for getting the maximum bonus experience per map. You said something before we record. You said something about bonus experience being a lot more tight early on, and then a lot more lenient later on too. Like the amount that you get for like per units, right?
Yeah. So normally backspin, it's like at the beginning, like when you first have access to them, like from around that chapter 8 to like chapter like 11 to 12 part, it's like that's when it's like you might have to be a little bit more weary. But around, I want to say around the desert chapter, so like chapter 15 onward, that's kind of when it really starts to blow apart, because you get like so much around that time especially. So like that's just something worth noting before we start.
Yeah, I think that's fair. So, and what I did in my run, like I said earlier, I reserved a lot of my bonus experience for one unit that I thought would do a lot of work, which is Marcia. So I don't think you should be expecting to use your Bex like right away, right? Generally, you want to maybe save it up for a really good unit a lot of the time, because like you can Bex Oscar or Boyd in the early game, but I think you get much more return on it if you wait on it for a better unit, probably, right?
Yeah. Boyd, I definitely would not recommend as a Bex candidate. Let's just get that out of the way, but we'll talk more about that as we go along.
Yeah, maybe we should just get into, the units, and we're gonna go through them in order of availability, and some of them they might not move, but we'll definitely discuss each and every one of them, which might take multiple sessions. I don't know yet. I'm not a time traveler, so yeah. So how about we start with Ike? We'll just for each of these units, the plan, which we might deviate from a little bit, is I'll go over why they're here in the first place, why I thought they belonged here in the first place, how my mind has changed a little bit since then, and then Typhoon. If I made any horrible mistakes or you have anything to add, please feel free to add, and we'll go. Of
course.
So for Ike, initially my thoughts for Ike were, well, he's available for every chapter, and I think generally availability is a beneficial thing for a unit, but only insofar as they're actually helping complete objectives or do something else that matters, like, I don't know, side objectives, I guess, or helping other characters get kills. And I think Ike, for that, he does something for almost every chapter, but he's rarely crucial. And I think for most of the chapters that I was playing with him, even in the early game, he wasn't really helping other people that much. And sometimes I even had to help him be safe because he's not the most sturdy character out there. He's all right, but he's not great. The only times when he's not, I wouldn't call him a liability, but the only time he's not like average or like slightly below average is the very late game when he gets the Ragnell. Even after his promotion, I don't think he's all that great. Like, I'm going to say this for Boyd as well. I think there's a time and a place, even in efficient context, for units that are on foot, if they're good at combat. Like someone like FE7 Harken or Pent or Hawkeye or FE8 Garrick or Dussel, they're really not mounted characters, even if you think they are. Dussel has 6 move and Garrick is usually a hero, so I don't consider them like mounted units like Seth, so they're very different in that regard. But I don't think FE9 Ike is one of those units. FE10 Ike definitely is. FE9 Ike this is not that great at fighting. He does okay, but he doesn't do great. And so I find him pretty mediocre, and I might even move him down a little bit from what I've seen right now, but he still helps a little bit. So I don't know how that compares. And like, if you compare to someone like, I don't know, late game units that are actually really good, like Tanith, I find it a really tough comparison. The Tanith is already here, but that's kind of where I'm at, because I don't think Ike is that good, but he's always there, and he's always kind of helpful. That's where I'm at with him. So what do you think?
Okay, so the thing with Ike's a pretty interesting unit, and he's generally a unit that's had very split opinions on amongst like the community. My 2 cents is this. So Ike's early game, it's usually dependent on how his early levels turn out, so kind of in the same boat as Boyd in that regard. But like if he's like getting his strength and his speed procs early on, for example, if he gets at least 2 levels, he's guaranteed 1 in prologue, and generally he'll at least get another in like chapter 1. But like in chapter 2, it can be relevant if he's gotten strength and speed both times, for example, where he can like have a steel sword and actually 1-round KO some enemies there. But if he doesn't, then like he can be like very average. But his early game, for the most part, is like, it's okay, but it's not like anything special, like you said before. Around a lot of his like 1 to 2 range, like his sword lock detriments usually can't kick in, I find, around chapter 7, and then like he's kind of like meh to mediocre until like his promotion. And like, sure, he'll have moments where like he might be able to do stuff, like for example, he like in chapter 12, like he could like put the Legusler to use, to like okay use. Although like, to be fair, that's like a map that like Marcia's kind of just like mostly doing most of the work.
That's the Raven boat map, right?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, I'm trying to name things with that whenever possible, because not everyone has the numbers memorized by heart.
Right. Okay, yeah, that's fair. But usually his post promotion, like from chapter 18 to pre-Ragnell, I think that's where people might underrate him in some aspects, mostly because like he can actually put Aether to good use, and like it's actually one of the few mastery skills I'd argue that you actually like there isn't really much of an opportunity cost for Ike to use.
I agree. I think the masteries are kind of bad in this game overall, so that one is actually good.
Yeah, and then like, so Aether is like pretty unique in the sense that each proc you're essentially getting Soul and Luna in one hit, in like 1 proc essentially. Like it's a nice 2-for-1, and in the late game it can be relevant because like units actually can have trouble like 1-round KOing or just killing enemies, so like I can have that going for him for the most part. And like, for example, you could do something like have him like run like a Brave Sword or like a Killing Edge in some instances, and like there will be times where he has to actually like fight enemies to like get to the seize point, right?
Yeah, clear the way, right?
Yeah, especially it's rather. I find it rather relevant against like tough enemies like generals who are like notoriously annoying to kill.
Oh
and
yeah,
whatnot.
No, I think
Yeah.
FE9 enemies are weak, but they tend to be kind of bulky. It's not just the generals, right? It's like the Lagoos can also be pretty hard to kill.
Oh yeah,
sometimes.
no, the Lagoos are like really annoying, especially the late game ones.
Yeah.
Ones like some of them are like super tough to kill. Like I think in my LTC run, like a capped out Jill was like barely 1 round KOing. So the Lagoos with like a maxed out steel axe forge, which at least tells you how hard it is to kill.
Yeah, that's like stronger than the silver, I think. That's really stupid how strong they are. Yeah, definitely. I think there was something else with it. I think there's like a couple objectives where Ike is like really good. Like the early game route maps especially, because early on only Titania has one rounding, right? So you want to combine work kills anyway, which were like Oscar and Boyd and Ike, and he does that okay.
Yeah, so like I think like it's just that post promotion to like pre Ragnar where like he might get a little less credit than like he does normally.
Mm-hmm. There was something I wanted to ask you. So you say that Aether is like pretty underrated and good. So would you recommend putting Aether on him and then replacing it with Wrath Resolve for late game?
Yeah, until like just keep Aether on him until like the very last chapter, because I find that you get a pretty good bang for your buck as far as like mastery skills go, and like I said before, there's just like no real competition for that slot anyways. Yeah, especially like because like Ike's skill growth is like usually like he'll be able to get skill like no problem for the most part. So like proc rates, like especially when you combine it with something like a Brave Sword or like even a Killing Edge, like the odds of him at least getting it once usually are decent, to say the least.
Yeah, so if he's 3-shotting, he's usually 2-shotting between Killing Edge and Aether.
Yeah, because like Aether, like being able to cut your opponent's defenses like in half is like super nice.
Yeah, that's like +10 against a lot of enemies already.
Yeah.
So do you think he should be moved then? Do you think Ike should go anywhere else?
I think B tier is fine for him, and like I do think he's better than Joffrey and Khalil, but that's because I think those two should go down. But
yeah,
we could talk more about them later.
Yeah, maybe we can leave him where he is, and then we can move him accordingly as other units go in and out of B tier. That's fine with me.
Yeah,
okay. So the next units to join are Oscar, Boyd, and Titania. I guess we can get Titania out of the way because she's so big, so important.
Yeah.
So I put Titania as the best unit in the game, and as I'm playing hard again, I have a bit of second thoughts about whether she belongs above Marcia. I think it's a very interesting discussion to have, but I don't think anyone is going to question the fact that she belongs in S tier. She's one of the best units in the whole series. I think I put her in like top 15. I don't think anyone's going to question that. I do think...
Yeah, I don't know about that.
Ooh, here we go again. All right. Okay. Actually, I had that discussion again with my Patreons a while ago. I just remembered, and we actually considered dropping her out of that top 15. So maybe I'm actually like down on that as well. But I do think she's still like super dominant within this game at the very least. Like especially in Maniac mode, but even on hard mode, she does destroy like not the entire game actually, like the first half. I think around the halfway point, you get to a point where flying becomes so good that even if her combat were better than theirs, there's still a good argument that the flyers at that point are better. But I actually do think that Titania's, I think particularly her strength is not sufficient for a lot of the late game targets, and she doesn't have any ways like Ike to boost her damage output beyond like a forge. She can fall short at some point. So I think her speed is fine because of the Night Ward, but I think her strength falls off a little bit to the point where she can't two-round things. But she's still like super powerful, and I don't think I'm dropping her out of S tier. But
sure. I guess I'll add my 2 cents on Titania. So like you said, Titania pretty much dominates the first like at least 10 chapters. Like she's by far your best unit, more or less. Like that's like pretty much undisputed for at least the first 11 chapters or so, give or take, because like she's pretty much your only unit in the early game who's consistently one-rounding and whatnot. And she's usually very crucial to a lot of like strategies. For example, like a lot of the early, like I think you want her to like go ham with like her hand axe in like chapter 7. So like you plan around that specifically, for example. And
so Shinon and Gatrie map, right? The one in the castle with Mia.
Yeah, the one with like the massive route map, because that's like the only hand axe you have until like chapter 8, which is like a pretty dumb, like it's like kind of a troll move by IS.
You get like a javelin or a short spear or something, and that's about it for 1-2 range. I think,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Your 1-2 range options aren't like that good, or like not plentiful to say the least. And then like and then around the time Marcia comes by, like Titania is still probably your best unit until chapter 12. That's kind of when you kind of see this gradual shift between Titania and Marcia, because like chapter 12 is the like Raven boat map, and Marcia's pretty much the only unit who can actually move outside the boat and like actually do stuff.
Yeah.
So like and then a lot of the late game maps kind of tend to start screwing Titanium over, especially like in terms of terrain and stuff. Like in chapter 15, like pretty much all your paladins are useless. So like
what's 15
like,
desert, right?
Yeah, the desert map. And then like even in like chapter 17, like the really long like 4-parter.
Oh, the swamps.
And 17, like the swamps like slow her down. So like Marcia and Joe, like they kind of have to do the bulk of the work. And then like she's still like useful for a fair bit of maps. And like even in chapter 21, there can be she's still probably one of your better options for like high movement units because of like all the sleep staff bishops in that map.
And where you fight Anna?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and like all the like sleep staff spam. And like Titania has like one of the better res bases and growths of like all the paladins and stuff, so like it's worth at least consider bringing her there.
Oh yeah.
So like there's that to consider. And then like from like that point onward, it's like kind of like, oh, you're kind of having your flyer do a good chunk of your work for you, where Titania is like still serviceable, but like she's definitely not your best unit anymore by that point.
No.
So like there's I think an argument could be made that she isn't necessarily best unit in the game. I would still put her at number 2, and I still consider her like one of the big 4 that like the game is like centered around primarily.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, so I do think Marcia is better than Titania.
Okay. That's fair.
Yeah.
I'm actually, I'm not sure yet. I'm at the point where Marcia is like starting to be better than Titania. So at late game, I'll probably think Marcia is much better than Titania just because of recency bias. We can leave that open once we discuss Marcia, I guess. But
yeah, we'll talk more about Marcia.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And there was one other thing. Oh yeah, a real brief note, because we're not really discussing Maniac mode, but I just want to briefly note that I think if you're playing Maniac mode in Japanese version, where the enemies are more numerous and even tougher and there's less bonus speed to go around, I think you could make the argument that Marcia is worse just because of everything that works a little bit more against her. Do you agree? Are you factoring? Are you also factoring in like the crit forge glitch in Maniac? No.
Oh, okay. In that case, then I can see why. I can definitely see why. Where like your caps and stuff matter even more in that context, but we'll talk more about Marcia's shortcomings in that regard later.
I guess it's more of a Marcia versus Jill thing than a Marcia versus Titania thing, if anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about Boyd or Oscar next?
Let's. You know what? We already just talked about the Paladin's disadvantages late in the game, so we probably might as well just get Oscar out of the way. So I put Oscar in S tier initially because I was like, well, you know, double Earth support is Pwnage Incarnate, and he's high move unit Natalia, so he's really good. And then I've used him for 1.5 playthroughs now, and come to think of it, I think he's been horribly disappointing in both of them. So in the Iron Man I played in Path of Radiance, he got like really badly stat screwed, and I thought he was just far below average, which he was. He was really, really bad. There was this late. I think he had the same strength as Soth when Soth joined or something. It was very bad.
Oh, dude. Okay.
But that was because of Beck's Soth, so it's not quite fair to Oscar to say that. But now in this round that you're seeing in the bottom right, I also tried to use Oscar, but more as I wasn't trying to like make him really good. I already knew I wasn't going to use him like really long term. I was trying to make use of him while he was available and free, and there wasn't much more competition for him. So I gave him levels. Like I tried to feed him kills every now and then, but I still found him really disappointing because he had like the forward problem where he was just falling short on everything every time I would try to kill. Like I would try to set up a kill for like another unit, and then he just misses javelin or something. Stuff like that just kept happening. That really frustrated me. I still think he's good, but I think I'm definitely not keeping him in S tier. I don't think he should be on the same tier as the Flyers and Titania, and maybe even 2 tiers below. I'm not sure exactly where, because One thing that's really been surprising to me is I'm playing off fixed growth. So before I thought, well, my Oscar's getting screwed, like he's getting RG screwed, so it must be bad. Now I'm playing off fixed growth, and he's still missing strength benchmarks all over the place. Like his strength is really disappointing. Now, to be fair and balanced, once you promote Oscar, he gets access to Forged Steel axes if you want him to, and that will help a little bit. But I think he's still gonna fall short on two-shotting a lot of late game enemies. He's gonna be fine survivability wise because he has the supports and his bulk is good and he can have soul if you really need him to help have more. But I'm kind of down on his offense particularly, and I think if you're not gonna be good at killing enemies, like why would I expose him instead of someone like Kieran or Titania or like a Forged Steel Jill or Marcia? Like at that point he's just kind of getting in the way. So yeah, I'm kind of down on Oscar right now. I think I'm gonna move him down a bit. I'm just not sure how far. So what do you think?
Okay. I definitely agree Oscar should move down. Main thing with Oscar is that his early game is like actually like okay, because like there's some stuff he can do, like he can nab you to Speedwing and the Angelic Grove villages while like Titania and Aether doing their thing. In chapter 2 he can like pretty much take the left side of the map like all by himself, like at base. So like he also has that going, and he's usually like okay like for like getting like at least helping out at least for like the early game. And his offenses definitely do underwhelm and are not very good. I think in my like LDC run, like my Oscar that was like getting like perfect like growth and stuff, like only did like 1 damage to an Armor Knight in like chapter 6, which was like hilarious. Yeah, it was like so depressing. But like the other thing is that like Oscar's natural bulk is like pretty solid like at base from what I've noticed. But like every paladin, it's mostly like their actual usefulness kind of gets reduced like a little bit as the game goes on, mostly due to like the map objectives and like the map terrains that they have. Oh man, I also forgot to mention Eat Rock as far as maps where paladins get completely neutered. Like you can only move like 2 to 3 tiles like they're as if they're Tearing Saga Armor Knights, which is like super depressing. Yeah, not even joking, they have like free move in that game, but that's besides the point.
Yeah, I think that's also another map where Ike is a little bit better than gets credit for, because he can move like what? Like he just move full or like 4 or 5 or something like that.
Yeah, something like I think he can like keep like his full 6-7 move. But usually you can at least somewhat patch Oscar's offenses up with like forging, like come chapter 8, at least for a little bit, as long as he's been getting a speed procs, which usually he won't have trouble doing for the most part. So there's that. And like I said, like the gap between like Oscar and Kieran honestly are like not too big, mostly because like any advantages that Oscar has over Kieran kind of offsets to a degree.
I agree.
So like
I personally think Kieran is better right now, but I don't mind putting him like roughly an equal footing because I do think Kieran is a tad better, just a tad, but he's definitely not as good as people like to think he is. Yeah, the way you phrase Oscar's early game really struck with me. I think you said he helps out, and that's really the way I feel Oscar is in the early game. He helps combine for kills, or he takes like a little section of the map by himself, or he gets like stat boosters for other people, which is helpful, but like it can't be understated how big of an impact Titania has in the early game, right? She does 90% of all the work, so and everyone else is just like self-improving or getting like side objectives done, which is helpful, but it's not like it's not an S tier unit is what I'm thinking. So do you think it should be like A or a B tier? That's kind of one thing. I think A tier personally.
Oh man, cause I think I'd put him at the bottom of A. But I feel like wherever we put Oscar, we kind of have to put Kieran like side by side for the most part.
You can, I mean, if you want to, we can deviate a little bit. We can talk about Kieran and then go back to the early game units because they're kind of similar, right? So might as well.
Yeah. So I think Kieran's big thing is that his bases are like fairly solid for the most part, and he has access to axes. And because he has access to axes as a weapon type, what this means is that he also starts with C axes, so getting him to Brave Axe rank is like fairly easy to do, which is something Oscar definitely will never be able to quite do in any normal playthrough, because like weapon rank grinding outside of staves are like kind of a challenge. or like they can take a while. That is one other thing worth noting.
Interesting.
Because and so like Kieran, because like he already has axes, his promotion choice, you can really go any direction. Like you want him to use like if you want to like, let's say have him go bows and like grind him up to D rank bows and then double arm scrum to like break bow rank, like you can do that. I think Rangor mentioned that is like a legitimate option on Maniac, mostly because of like how bulky the wyverns are, but like that's not super relevant. And the other thing is that like Kieran generally won't have nearly as much trouble like hitting like benchmarks that Oscar, unlike Oscar. So like that's like the other thing I think I've noticed with like Kieran at least. And like Kieran also comes around the same time where you can kind of use the Night Ward to like patch up his problems. Whereas by the time like if you've been like leveling Oscar and stuff, it's like he may not necessarily be quite able to patch up any shortcomings he has. So that's something worth noting too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that the big difference has been in Kieran and Oscar is definitely the strength.
Yeah,
because like I said, his attack is much better due to axes, and I think just better strength in general, or if at least equivalent, if not better. I've been using Kieran a lot in this run, and I honestly think I remember people were playing 0% growth FE9, and if you base promote Kieran, he has like the same stats as Titania, roughly speaking. He's really good in that regard. And or something else that I wanted to say. I think that the strength that he has is better than the Oscar's like slight speed advantage if he even has one. Because, like I said, you can patch up the speed with a Night Ward, and once you've hit the speed benchmark with the Night Ward, you're good. You don't need any more than that. But attack overkill, you almost can't overkill attack in this game because the enemies are so bulky. So the edge that Kieran has in that regard is good as well. And I'm glad you brought up the bows too, because I actually did doing bow Kieran as well. I didn't find it super useful, but I was fighting that one Berserker boss in the Fog chapter with Makalov.
Oh, in chapter 14.
I'm glad you have him memorized because I don't.
His name's hard to pronounce, and I don't want to try pronouncing him again.
He has a killer axe and a crit bonus as well. And Kieran actually ate a crit, but fortunately I just gave him soul for that chapter, so he was fine for the enemy phase, but I couldn't take another hit from him. So I had like 87 hit with either my normal iron axe or my iron bow. So it's like, okay, I could risk another death, or I could just use the iron bow and I just killed him with that. So stuff like that.
Although I think one thing it is worth noting is that Kieran sometimes can get doubled at base, like if he's using like a heavier axe, like the steel axe for example, because they do like weigh a ton, and strength and constitution is based on strength in Path of Radiance. So that's true. That's something I have noticed it occasionally, at least like with base Kieran. But it's usually not super detrimental because like his bulk is like fairly good for the most part, and he'll get by.
Yeah, I don't think that really matters much because for any unit that you're using, I think you should almost always just give them a good forge, like a good iron forge to start off with, and especially if you're using like few units, right? If you're using like I don't know 5-6 combat units in a team, then you should have forges for everybody available almost all the time. So you can just give him forged iron, and then once you can use steel axes, you can give him those. So I think that's not much of a point against him.
Yeah, because at base, like he does lose like 4 attack speed if he tries to use a steel axe, which is like kind of depressing if you think about it.
Yeah, but like, why would you give him a steel axe? I'm trying to understand.
That's true. Like, that's true. That's fair. I think it's like if you need to finish off a kill or something like that. But yeah, it's just something like kind of funny I find with like how like the constitution or like the attack speed formula works in Tellius.
Yeah. It's really generous, I think, to the player in general. Like early on, you double like every single early game brigand because they're all weighed down by their iron axes, and then late game you just use like silver lances and steel lances on everyone you want to because strength is like 20. You never get weighed down by anything. It's so funny. I like with the forges as well. I think I'm glad you brought up forges specifically or maybe I did. I don't know. Either way. Because I think around the time you get Kieran, you can already forge iron. You've been forging iron for a long time, and then a little bit after, you actually get access to forged steels, which are also like really strong. You can reduce the weight on those, I think, as well if you want to. Like, I'm in 13. I think you get forged steels there.
Yeah, you get forged steels in chapter 14. So like which is like a pretty good timing too, because like that's when you kind of need that extra punch in those weapons. So like that's like one thing worth noting too. Yeah, but I do think, but like Oscar, Kieran obviously suffers like a lot of the same problems as like other paladins, where like they become a little less useful. Like they're still like worth a deployment slot, but they're not like they're far from like your most valuable units.
I agree.
On like any given map. So like there's like definitely that factor holding them back. A lot of maps where they just outright can't do anything.
Yeah, I agree. With Kieran, that hurts him especially, I think, because his availability list doesn't have all the free chapters that Titania and Oscar do. But I still think he's like right next to Oscar, roughly speaking.
Yeah, they're like kind of like a 1A 1B kind of deal. That's how I find it.
Definitely.
Speaking of axe using units, let's talk about Boyd.
That's a good idea. How about I go first on Boyd? Because I want to take credit for how much I'm going to put him down. Okay, so I know. So I put him in A because I think if you ask like anyone who just plays FE9 and uses Boyd, he's fine. Like it's kind of like FE8 France in that regard. It's like there's nothing super wrong with Boyd per se. Like he has problems, sure. The primary one for efficiency context is that he doesn't have a mount. But like I said before, I think there's a place and a time in tier lists for good unmounted combat units. Like I said, FE7, Harken, Pence, Hawkeye. I can go through the whole list again. I think those are good. But I don't think Boyd is one of those units. I think his early game combat is like, it's fine. He can add up to kills just like Oscar and Ike. He's maybe a little bit worse than them overall because he doesn't double as easily. But he's still okay. And then you have so many good mounted combats. Like just in the S to B tiers alone, there are so many units here that outpace Boyd and also arguably outfight Boyd that I don't know why he's above like half of them anymore. Like he's around, but like I said with Ike, if you're around but you're not really helping with the main objectives or important side objectives, then I don't think you really should get a lot of credit for all that availability. And then in late game, there's probably chapters where Boyd isn't doing much of anything. There's probably still chapters where he does do something. Like I think he's probably fine, like the Eat Rock map, for example, because he's a good unit. But it kind of ends there for me.
Okay. Right. So I guess big thing with Boyd. So first of all, he has Tempest, which by the way is probably the worst skill in the entire game because it makes him incredibly inconsistent at actually hitting things. Because I think you can have like, because it doubles biorhythm bonuses, right? It's the one skill that reminds you that biorhythm is a thing and not in a good way, because like one moment Boyd could have like 80 hit and you're probably wondering, wait, why does he have like 80 or 90 hit on his opponent? And then that next moment, like the very next turn, he could suddenly just have like 50 hit or something on the same person. It's like hilarious. Okay, so normally biorhythm bonuses are like
it's
plus
5 to 10, right?
Yeah. I think it's like it's just plus minus 5. So like that's just your own biorhythm, right? So with Boyd, it's plus minus 10. But if you include the enemy, then it's like
right.
Yeah. And the thing is, unlike Radiant Dawn, you can't exactly manipulate your biorhythm since biorhythm isn't set in Path of Radiance at the start of each map, or like at least going by turns and stuff, like how the turns progress. Yeah. Which is like a unique mechanic in Radiant Dawn, but we're not talking about RD. Yeah, so for Boyd, that can be very frustrating. The other thing is that his bases are like kind of shaky in the sense, especially with the weapon type he uses, since axes in the early game is a bit of a double-edged sword, especially for Boyd. And much like Ike, he's very dependent on those early levels. If he's not getting those strength and speed level ups, then he could very well be like really awful. But even when he's getting those, he usually, like even in a perfect world where he's like getting all of the procs that you need out of him, it is worth noting that I find that even in 100%, he didn't really start one round KOing enemies reliably until like chapter 7 or even 8, give or take, which it tells you a fair bit, because I think that's probably the point in the game where he's the most useful. Yeah. But also the most frustrating, because you can't remove Tempest until you get access to bases, which is in chapter 8. So like he's super frustrating in that regard. And his like base skill is like not super high either, so like his hit rates are like all over the place. But like after chapter 8, I find that he's from around chapter 8 and then until Eat Rock, like your use per like Boyd most of the time is either doing filler combat or he's like helping shove like racing or something like that. Like he's just relegated to either like extremely filler combat duties or just like shove bot for the most part. But like invested Boyd can be like helpful in like a map like Eat Rock, because like if you did go through the trouble of like promoting him to warrior, backswing him up to like say like, because like his strength caps actually do let him 1-round KO some stuff with like a forged hand axe, which some units might not be able to do. So like you like rescue drop him to like the top of the map and then just gotta try and let him go ham for example.
Do you think his bulk is sufficient to take on like a lot of enemies like that?
He usually doesn't have a trouble capping his HP before promotion.
Yeah, my experience with Boyd is like he has a lot of HP but not that much defense. That's why I'm asking.
His defense, usually if you because like the enemies also don't have that much hit. Like their hit rates in Path of Radiance are not super good. So like usually he can get by for the most part, at least against physical enemies. Against magical enemies, different story.
Yeah.
Because like in the early game, his bulk definitely can, his like his paper defenses can be kind of a problem for him at times. But like personally, I would definitely drop him from A all the way to like C at the very least.
Yeah.
Because like unlike Ike, like he actually does have to fight for a deployment slot.
This is true. Yeah, I was considering C or even D, but I didn't want to put him in D because I think that's too low for him. Because
I still think he's one of your better like foot unit like options for foot units that aren't magic users.
No, absolutely. I think I agree with that assessment. I think he's fine for a foot unit. The issue is how much does being a foot unit hurt him in comparison to other units, and how does he compare to like other foot units, I guess. But in this case, he's probably better than most of the foot units. I'll put him in like top of C for now, I guess.
For now, that's fine for now. Because like we still got a lot to discuss.
Oh yeah, for sure. But that's okay. These are these are early game units, so they by normal means they have the most to talk about. That's the whole Chapter 1 squad covered, I think. Yeah, we're really making headway here. Chapter 1 squad. I think we get Rhys next then.
Rhys is...
Yeah, we might be able to like squeeze in the Mist as well, because like they're really
I feel like
Path of Radiance healing.
I think they should be described as kind of a package deal. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, okay. So I have actually been using Rhys a lot in this playthrough. I've tried to use Rhys. I forgot to deploy him once. I'm sorry. But I think healing in Path of Radiance is very interesting because the units are pretty bulky, but sometimes they do need healing because they took on like 10 enemies phase at once, because enemy density in Path of Radiance is super high, so even if the enemies individually don't do much damage, it adds up over time. But then you get the difficulty of you don't want your healer to be exposed because they don't counterattack, and in the case of Rhys especially, or like base level Mist, they also tend to die if they get exposed. So it's a very tricky balance you have to navigate. And Rhys is like still useful in most maps, especially in the early game when he's around for free, and then even in the mid game. I find that he's has some trouble getting to level 10 without bonus experience because the staff XP is like GBA level bad, so it takes a while to get there, but I think you have plenty of big speed to get into level 10 when you get a master suit if you want to.
His base level is like 5, if I remember correctly.
Something about right. I know Mist is 1, which is like a different story, but it's pretty bad.
But no, it was level 4, but
okay.
But thing with Rhys, the nice thing about Rhys is that he can get the C rank stays fairly easily. For like free Hammer use. Hammer and Physic. So like staff grinding in Path of Radiance, as compared to grinding up weapon rank for other weapon types, is actually fairly generous for a variety of reasons. For starters, you get like 3 to 4 defend maps to play with. So like that's like a lot of turns that you can kind of just get for free by just spamming like healing and stuff for free, more or less. So I found that like even for someone like Mist, so the most relevant rank you normally want to try and get up to is a B rank for rescue in particular. Rhys is definitely not the best rescue user, but like if you actually want to use him for like rescue and stuff like that, then like there is some relevance for that, as getting him that rank is fairly generous. But Mist can go from E to B fairly reasonably too. I think I got her to like B rank staves in like chapter 17, and she joined in like chapter 8. So like the time frame for getting to that rank is fairly nice. Other thing is that Rhys's like base magic is like actually pretty solid. So like if you're trying to get like extended physic range or like even especially rescue range, then like that's super nice for him. Funny thing is he also like light rank is tied into staff rank.
I was gonna bring that up, yeah. With Rhys, it's like, geez, do I expose him and try to fight with him?
No, but like, yeah, but he's definitely a very solid Master Seal candidate, because you don't need to actually get him all the way to level 20 if you don't want to. Because like personally, I would save my Master Seals for someone like Rhys or Mist.
No, I agree. I agree, because everyone else can just get to 21 like reasonably easily thanks to Bex.
Yeah, and like as a result, like the amount of Bex you have to dump into them, or if any at all is like not too high, at least in Rhys's case. For Mist, no. So the thing that Mist has over Rhys is mainly in her promotion in Valkyrie.
Yeah.
So
mount, right?
She's pretty much your only mounted staffer one of 2 mounted staffers in the game.
Well, yeah, at least I joined so late. It's like it's a fine distinction for her.
Yeah, but like in Mist's case, like the thing is getting her from E to B rank fairly easy to do. Like at least since you get rescue like fairly late, like chapter 20, you can easily get her to there by then, because I've done it myself.
Mm-hmm. But when you say easy, you mean like without costing turns, right? Because I assume you still have to take some effort to make sure she has heal targets.
Oh yeah, like you gotta make sure she actually has people that she can use her staff on. But like in terms of just like getting her to that rank, it's fairly generous, rest all things considered. So despite the fact that she has E rank staves, so you know there is that to consider.
Yeah, I think E rank staves like it seems annoying, right? But it's only 15 heals until you get to D, right?
Yeah. And then like for some weird reason, Men gives the exact same amount of weapon experience as heal.
Oh, gross.
Yeah, it gives free. Both of them give free, which is like okay. So that's like what, 5 heals or something, if I did my math right. But anyways, right. Valkyrie. So obviously this means she's your only mobile rescue user, and the nice thing about it's mostly for the late game that you'd be training her for that. In particular, like from like the moment she joins, you're pretty much preparing her for like any, like especially for chapter 24 or like the Arrive map where you're like where Joffrey and like friends are like trying to hold out. So you kind of want to get there as fast as possible. On Maniac, it's stressed even further because like they're on even more of a time limit of like how long they can live.
Oh really? Okay.
Live mostly from like the enemy density and stuff.
Oh, I see. It's been a while since I played that map, but I don't remember it being particularly tight, but I remember rushing over there anyway because, you know, that's what the wants you to do.
Yeah, you definitely... Oh, yeah, because like there's like a fair share of enemies, so like you kind of don't want to waste too much time. But so that's like one nice thing she has going for her. It's just like the mobile rescue and stuff. But like that's the main reason you would train her up, I find.
So you generally just spend all your hammers on rescue, and you use rescue whenever you are in a time-sensitive situation where you just want to cut turns. Is that right?
Yeah, that's mainly what I used it for. Although I think the rescue like usage routing is like actually still generous enough, because like I think like I use like free rescues in 24, but there is an alternative strategy where you can just use one and be okay. Mm-hmm. Although it's like I think that was like what Cheeky done is Maniac run, so like that's just something worth noting. So like there is some flexibility for like extra rescue. It's not as tight as it seems to be, I'll just say that. Because like it can be especially useful in like the Pitfalls map as long as you can kind of get Mist past like all the pitfalls and stuff.
I'm assuming you cannot rescue someone into a pitfall, right?
No, I don't. I have actually not tried that.
Foiled again. Yeah,
but then again, you'd have to use like your again, there are options, but because she's mounted, this also means that she cannot be rescue dropped, which is like
Yeah.
kind of a downside that she has compared to like some of your other rescue candidates in
Yeah.
some instances. Like in 21, like it would really suck mostly because like you can't just like rescue Mist over the river.
Yeah, you'd have
and
to like be
stuff.
for unpromoted to do that. That sounds kind of
Yeah. Yeah, so like you'd be better off using like one of the sages or like Rhys, for example.
Yeah, I guess it's like we do like to talk that like Path of Radiance is very mount dominated, but I do like that they gave other units like niches like that, like being able to get rescued and shoving. Like Rhys can still shove Ike and Raisin, which I think is interesting.
Yeah, so like there is that, but I think you could definitely argue the rescue utility in the late game that could at least push them to bottom of B. I mean, I might personally I would maybe consider higher, but I think bottom of B is like fair because like not everyone is like really into that kind of thing.
That's fair. Wait, what's the last tier you said was like bottom of B or like top of C? Is that what you're saying?
Bottom of B.
Okay.
I think bottom of B. I think they're at least worth moving like one tier up because like there's some actual payoff to investing in them.
Bit bigger than Boyd. I can definitely see that. I was personally thinking like keeping them C, moving them a bit higher, but looking at that, I think the bottom of B is actually fair for them. The only thing is now I like to have to. It's gonna mess up my overlay. No, my overlay. Shit. I'll just move Joffrey down real quick. You won't mind, I'm sure. Let's move him down real quick. We'll talk about it later. I'll move him down real quick for now.
Okay, yeah.
Which do you think is better between these two?
Oh, I mean, personally,
I go back and forth all the time. Personally,
I personally think there's a little bit more payoff to using a Mist over like Rhys personally, mostly because like the staff rank advantage that Rhys has is like somewhat negligible, given that Mist can also reach it fairly easily.
That's mostly for in terms of rescue, right?
Yeah.
Don't you think that Physic and Hamern? I mean, mostly Physic I think seems useful to me.
Yeah, Physic can be useful, but like. Yeah, Physic can definitely.
And then Rhys also has early game utility, so like.
I think like because okay, like you have like 2 defend maps, which is kind of like whatever in between that, and then like I think it's like I don't think there's like a big enough gap to warrant it, but I would give the slight edge over to Mist, just like. But that's just me personally.
That's fair. I haven't played the late game yet. Actually, I didn't invest in Mist, whereas I tried using Rhys, so I'm probably biased in that way too.
Yeah.
There's one more thing I want to mention real quick about Mist before we move on. She's technically in the. Oh, that would have been one thing too, but I think we've done plenty. But I just want to bring up the Black Knight fight real quick because she does exist there. The thing about Black Knight fight in efficient setting is the most efficient way to play it is turn 1 escape. So
unless you're a madman like me and just decide to do double Aether.
Yeah, that's probably fine too. Does that 1 round double Aether?
It does. I was able to do it. Nice. I think Ike doesn't even have to be cap strength to do it.
In that case, like you don't need Mist either, right? So it still doesn't change anything.
Unless Ike randomly gets like hit by like an Eclipse, or like Luna from Black Knight.
Well, that's the value of Mist, right? It's like
Yeah.
if you want to attack on player face with Ike, you need him to get healed by Mist, or else it's like not safe if he gets Luna. So that's like the value of Mist, but that doesn't really matter in this kind of setting. I just wanted to bring it up because it's interesting.
That's true.
Yeah, it's meme value, that's for sure. I'll defer to your judgment for Mist over Rhys because I haven't really tried either of them in full extent.
Yeah.
I do think they're a bit underrated, generally.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's those guys. I think so. We just did that early game squad. There's like a couple more early game units left, but we're like 48 minutes in. We can like try to round it out with like Gatrie, Shinon, and Soren. I think that's like the early game squad covered basically. That's
pretty much.
Okay.
Yeah, that's like the main original Grail Mercs.
Yeah.
Right.
We were. I think it's technically. I think technically next would be Gatrie and Shinon, but I think it actually would be good to discuss Soren first because we're already on topic of staffs anyway, right? So might as well cover that. So I put Soren at the top of B because I thought he's a pretty bad early game, but I think the idea is that you use the early game as opportunity to train him up a bit, and then you get access to Bex and you invest it to him. And there's like a huge disparity between how good some people think Soren is and how good my experience with him has been for a lot, because Soren's early game is so underwhelming with the Wind Tome with like one might and his low ass magic and his inability to double anything and his super bad bulk. It's like a combination of super bad things. I put him in bad unit feel with Bopper for a reason. He's just such a pain to use early on. But I have seen other people use Soren and have a really big payoff on him. I know there's this strategy that I know Cheeky likes to do where he would make Soren like an actual like really over leveled unit, give him Vantage, and then between Vantage, Adept, Earth Support, and a lot of other investments, he would actually be able to reliably survive enemy phase. And then his high offense at higher levels comes into play, where he hits on enemy res, and he has like really high magic, so he hits really hard, he doubles everything. And then because enemies don't get to attack him very much because of Vantage, he rarely gets attacked in the first place. You know, he just kills them before they ever get to hit him. And that's like so different from what I'm used to Soren being that I'm having a hard time imagining it. But I know he's done it, so I know it's legit. I just don't know how reliable it actually is, or if it's actually like a rigged strategy. But I know Soren can do that, and then from there, I think it kind of transfers from combat to like trying to use stabs whenever possible, because apparently he has a really big rescue range, and that's an idea that's apparently important.
He has like,
go ahead, tell me how good Soren is.
Okay. First and foremost,
I think I would personally right now I'm inclined to drop him. Actually, I don't think he's that good, but maybe I'm wrong on that. Let me know.
Okay. So first and foremost, like I feel Soren and Illyana should be discussed as a package deal. So I'm just gonna get that out of the way because the differences people tend to speak on the two of them is ridiculous. Like the fact that people act like Soren is miles better than Illyana, or Illyana's like miles worse than Soren. Like, no, okay. Like Soren's early game stinks. Okay, let's just get that out of the way. There is no denying that because he has 0 strength. This means he gets weighed down by everything. So like any advantage he has in speed is like kind of negated by that. And like magic tomes like suck donkey balls in this game like in terms of like might and whatnot. But with all that being said, what Soren does have going for him is like the defend maps early on, where if you're like trying to feed him levels and stuff, it can absolutely be done. Can
I ask something about that? So can you feed him more than one enemy per turn? Because what I usually find is like you can set up one enemy to like 1 HP and then kill him with Soren, but then if you're trying to like feed him kills to enemy phase, somehow the enemies just get healing AI and just run away. So it's just 1 per turn.
Okay. So I think in some so the enemy healing AI usually only happens when they're like at 40% or below, like they're like 40% or lower on their max HP. So that's when healing AI kicks in. That's like an important thing to know. So like no, they don't always run away, but when they do, it's pretty frustrating. But you can still plan around it somewhat. So that's like something worth noting. But it can be very difficult to feed him like kills on like defend maps and whatnot. But like if you try to put the effort in, then like it can be done. Normally I think like if you're trying to do like the super sage strats, as I like to call them, you normally want either Soren or Illyana promoted by, I want to say chapter 11 preps. That's probably because that's like probably the best time for them to start working on their staff.
That is the Arrive map, right? After the prison chapter with the black knights from the house? Yeah. Okay.
That's pretty much. Yeah. But the thing is, with that map, if you're trying to get Joe, you have to wait for her to show up on like turn 5. So like you may end up having some extra time to like kind of chill around and like heal units and stuff. So that's when I would say you want them promoted at the very least. At least to start working on that staff grind, because like E to B is not exactly the easiest thing to get to. And the other thing is that one thing Illyana does not have going. Well, Illyana and like Soren, like their strength or their attack speed differences are actually not as big as I mentioned before, because Illyana has some actual strength to her base.
Yeah, so roughly equally fast.
Yeah, like give or take. So like that advantage that people like to say Soren has is over exaggerated, but it does require feeding a lot of bonus XP to them. But you can do it. Yeah, you can do it without completely cutting into Marsha's bonus XP pool too much. Like you can definitely pull it off. With that being said, although I think when I did it, it was like somewhat tight. Like I only had like 1 or 2 levels worth like to spare in between when I had to. But the difference was I was trying to do it for chapter 9. So like that's like a whole 2 chapter difference there.
Yeah, with chapter 10 bonus to be out of the way, yeah.
Right. And if you're doing it the stealthy way, but right. But the big thing with Super Sage is their payoff is very good if you go out of your way to do it, because they can do a lot of things for you. They can be your rescue user. They can also do late game combat for you, and they can also use siege tomes. All 3 which play like a fair bit of relevance in the late game. So like that's why you're doing it in the first place, right? Because like enemies tend to have much lower res, so like the tome, like by that point in the game, if you've been training them up, they're like fairly juiced up on magic and whatnot. Although it is worth noting that Illyana's magic will be a little bit worse off than Soren's, but it's like nothing that she can't overcome per se.
She still won rounds with most generic tomes then, right?
Yeah,
or like forged tomes, maybe.
Yeah, with forged tomes, and like money by that point isn't an issue. But Soren's thing is that his weapon, he can have trouble getting to bolting rank, or like even like I found that you definitely might have to use an arm scroll on him because like
for bolting
tomes, like siege tomes are C rank. So that's something to consider. Now Illyana has Defunder, so this means that she can get the bolting a little bit easier, and that's like, but even and like on promotion they get like automatic D rank in like all their weapon types if it's not already there. So that's something to consider too. And they have like, for I think Soren, like by fixed mode averages, I think can actually reach capped out magic if like you get them like close to like level 20/20 or something like that, or if you invest in like a spirit dust and stuff, so like he can have like pretty fat rescue range, which is really nice for a late game, like if you're trying to rescue skip a lot of those maps. And the siege tomes are super useful for like some of the late game boss kills too. In chapter 22 it's like super relevant because like it's like the one with like all the priests and stuff, and you have to try and keep them alive. So like
I was gonna ask because you mentioned training them for the siege tomes, and the way I think of it is like how much do you need that beyond Khalil? I'm assuming there's a use for like a trained sage to actually have siege tomes.
Yeah, the other thing, you also might want it for chapter 21, the map before that too. You definitely want it for, I find that it can definitely help against Bertram, who's like a super annoying boss, like the boss of Clash, because like he has a rune sword.
Yeah, that's gross.
So he can like recover his own health. And like the thing is like obviously you're not gonna be able to do like what I did in my rigged run with like just one rounding the boss casually with like a siege tome and whatnot, but it can still help for like just at least giving you that little bit of extra damage to kind of put you over the top.
Yeah, or reliability. I like that.
Yeah, so like that's like one thing to consider. So like it can help you combine kills. I think in the penultimate map, so chapter 28, the one with like all the lagoos and stuff, and it's like basically a furry convention.
Furry convention, yeah.
Yeah, there's like this one dragon lagoos blocking the way, like it will not move no matter what. Yeah, like they're goddamn Degensia. Kotor will not move, and it's just like yeah, you definitely, and the dragon lagoons in that map are notoriously bulky. Yeah. I think like Marcia with like Gab's strength and a Brave Lance was doing like 2 damage to it or something like that. It was like so bad.
Yeah, I think even if you have like Lagoon's Axe Kieran, you're not one-running that thing, and that's like the strongest thing I could think of. You might have a shot at one-rounding it with a bolting tome. You might. That's keyword here is might, but that also probably depends on how much strength you've been getting, which you're definitely not getting on Soren, because Soren has like 0 strength and like a 5% strength. Or 10 if you use like a strength band, but good luck with that. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, it's pretty low. I think at fixed growth he's still due for his first strength level up, even though it's like 20 levels in. It's taken quite some time. So there's a little utility for bolting and rescue stack utility. Is what you're saying.
Okay, and also like just late game combat, especially for Eat Rock.
Yeah.
Even like besides like siege toming that one dragon, like they do fairly well against like a lot of late game Lagoos in terms of like just purely one rounding. I will say Soren is definitely a little bit of a better choice than Ike, especially if you're like trying to get both of them into the action because of earth support and stuff.
Yeah.
So like that is one thing Soren has going. Although Illyana's natural bulk is a little bit better normally. One thing I will note about Illyana that can be frustrating is if you're trying to feed her kills in her join map, that can actually be, of course, Shade. Yeah, Shade just completely screws her over. Because that skill, like, sometimes works when you don't want it to work, and then, like, sometimes it will just, like, work the way it's supposed to, and then it's just all over the place. Yeah, and you can't even remove it until like you finish the chapter, which is like a massive troll by IS. But but I do think they're fairly similar in terms of like how they perform, and I think like Soren's early game advantages are like not big enough to.
No, he's a liability, I think, for sure.
Yeah. It's like non-existent.
It's not you get to use him; it's you have to use him, as Ravens would put it. So, what I'm hearing is like good utility, but with a pretty steep investment cost, though, because you do have to invest in them. So does that leave him in like? What I'm hearing is like lower B, maybe. Is that right? That's what I'm hearing personally.
I feel like it's like mid B mostly because like they can actually do a lot of stuff that your other units may not be able to do. At least like around, like I think where Soren is can be debated because Astrid and Maklov have the same problem as other paladins. And they're like, and that's gonna be that from Soren to like left. That's like a little bit tough, but I would definitely move Illyana next to Soren because I think I agree. Because usually you're choosing one or the other.
Yeah, I think they sound similar enough to me. There's some differences between them, like you discussed, but they seem similar enough. Will anyone be angry if I move Khalil out of here real quick, or do you think she'd B tier? Because if I move her out,
I think she's C. I think she's C.
Just for the sake of my overlay, nothing else. Just my overlay. Yeah. All right, come over here. We'll go like. You think above Ike? Like above Ike is fine. Below Ike.
Yeah, above Ike's fine.
Okay.
Above Ike's fine.
Above Ike.
Yeah.
Okay.
They're around that. Yeah, like Astrid to like Illyana. That's a very tight. I think that's a gap that can definitely be debated about. But we can talk more about that later.
Yeah, for sure. We're actually like already an hour in, so we could do Shinon and Gatrie if they're very short, and then wrap it up probably.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So let's see. Let me find Gatrie because he's the most logical to talk about next. I think. Where did I even put him? Is he like?
He's next to Titania.
Oh, I found him. He's right here. So I put him in C tier. I think mostly based on his early game utility, the chapter where you only have him, Titania, Shinon, and Ike, and then especially chapter 7 where you recruit Mia and you have to like route the entire map. He's like huge there, and like not just literally but also figuratively, because he just does a lot of. There's a lot of enemies to fight. You need to kill a lot of enemies, and no one else is really good at doing it. He has the bulk to survive by himself. It's pretty good. And then he vanishes, and then he comes back, and then you probably have units that are maybe not bulkier than him, but their combination of like mobility and bulk and offense is just way better. Like Gatrie's offense and mobility is just so bad compared to other units, and his higher bulk doesn't really offset it or anything. So he's he's usable as a flunky and like a shove bot, and I think that's kind of about it in efficient settings, I think. So
like
if you're gonna have that personally.
Same. Yeah, because if you're gonna have that kind of low move, like you better have the utility that Soren and Illyana has.
Yeah.
To like be worth that kind of trouble, like in my opinion. But anyways, with Gatrie, like I said, he's pretty solid in the early game. Like his bulk's gonna be pretty helpful. In chapter 4, he can be pretty helpful for like just shielding your weaker units.
Is 4 the one where you do everything with this? No, that's a very poor description.
Not quite
Soren, right?
Well, almost. Yeah, the one chapter 4 is the one where Soren comes in.
Yeah,
like, joins.
That's one.
And you have to kill the boss. Yeah. Right. So like Gatrie's kind of like you could like have him like rescue Rhys or like Soren, like just keep them out of trouble, and that kind of thing. And then like the thing is like there's like he really, like, even in his initial join at chapter 3, it's like he's not really doing all that much because it's mostly Ike and Titania and Shinon that's moving towards the objective, I find normally. And then on the
gets
topic,
like a house or something in my run, I think.
Yeah, you can get like an elixir or like the house where Nazir's just chilling. And then in chapter 7, it's kind of like a joint effort between him and Shinon. Shinon, like, Gatrie can like use one of the like doors as like a choke point and whatnot, and he can actually double some of the enemies potentially.
So like one enemy with like a sword slayer or with an armor slayer that does like 7 damage to him. It's hilarious.
Yeah,
it just doubles the remember
times 2 times 2 effectiveness. But yeah, so like Gatrie has his uses, but like once he comes back, it's like there's just no real reason to deploy him, and like it's just like there's not much he can offer that's like how warranted, like warrants a deployment slot, because like deployment slots around the time he comes back in chapter 13 become super competitive, because like you've already got guys like Joe, Marcia, Titania, like the paladins, like left Mordecai, you got all them and whatnot. So like there is
much away for utility,
yeah, like besides like shove chains, but even then it's like you have so many, like there's nothing notable, like you can't even shove like any of the mounted units, even if you do double statue frag.
He's no Mordecai or Warm, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So do you think is D tier? I know you mentioned this, we'll probably discuss this more in depth next time. I know you wanted to introduce an F tier for like some other units moving around, but right now do you think D tier is fine for him? Yeah,
D tier is fine because he actually does stuff like some other units. Yeah. We might as well talk about Shinon here too, because Shinon's a super interesting case. So Shinon, like, he has the worst weapon type in the game for the most part. Like, he's bolt locked, which for most units is kind of a death sentence. But Provoke actually has some interesting applications. In chapter 4, it's actually kind of relevant, I find, because like, for example, what I do is like I'd have Titania right next, like Shinon right next to Titania, right? What Shinon, because you actually still have to be kind of weary about weapon durability and stuff, but like you also don't want,
see where you're going.
Like you have to, so you kind of want to conserve that hand axe from chapter 3, because that's your only 1 to 2 range, but this isn't the map to use it in, right? So like you can have Shinon kind of draw over all the 1 range enemies and stuff, and not have Titania like break her weapon like in the middle of like enemy phase or whatever, because that enemy phase is gonna be a while.
I was expecting you to say like you use him to draw an archer so that Titania doesn't have to hand axe them.
Yeah, that too. That or more so, at least they don't completely block the way. That's the other thing too, right?
I see.
Right, so like there's some interesting applications there, and he can 1-round enemies like within there around like the time he's around initially with like the steel bolt if you need him to, and he does have like the random crit bonus, which can be annoying but also can be nice.
Yeah, it depends on what you want.
It's a two-way street. yeah
I remember I discussed it with Rengor. He actually said like Shinon's better than Maniac because he doesn't have the crit bonus, so he can set up kills for others without stealing them.
yeah, but you can either have him Iron Bow to hopefully not kill someone by accident and actually cripple them, or you can have him like use the steel bow to actually secure a kill. If he crits, so it's like okay, whatever, because you wanted him to kill anyways. Yeah, right.
It's not a big deal here and there.
In chapter 5, Provoke can be kind of useful. Like if you're trying to get some of your weaker units like Boyd or Oscar to be exposed for like prolonged enemy phases, or like prolonged combat per se during enemy phase, then like he can at least draw some attention away so that they don't immediately get killed.
Yeah.
So like there's some interesting Provoke applications that you can put to use with him, but like, and then once he comes, and then like after he leaves, he's like not around until Ike has finally promoted, and he has like the most convoluted recruitment ever.
Yeah, I'm probably gonna end up killing him in this run. I don't think he's gonna be sticking around, because I already missed a couple units, so I'm definitely not getting Shinon back. You talked about Provoke a lot. I actually talked about Shade a bit, so I should probably have asked this earlier, but do you actually know how they work, Shade and Provoke, like what they do?
Okay, so I'm going off of observation. So Provoke I didn't get to experiment around with my run nearly as much, but I am much more familiar with Shade, at least like getting a basic idea of how it works in Path of Radiance, because it's so for a record, that skill still is super inconsistent, but for the most part I think it just like makes for example, like there's some weird interactions, because I use Shade on Marcia in my LTC run because I wanted her to avoid fight certain enemies, but like I think on some boss units like it didn't really work at all, like for example against Grommel. Like I had
guy, right?
Yeah, so I had Soren and like Marcia, right? They both had 1 to 2 range. Thing was, Grommel actually would not attack Soren if he had a Forged Thundertone, because that could actually kill him. So like enemies will consider like at least the boss unit will consider self-preservation in some, and will ignore Shade. But I also find that on a lot of Laguz units, like especially the Firo Laguz units, they don't seem to work properly a lot of the time.
So they just ignore it a lot of the time?
Or like they'll just attack Marcia, which is like, so like it just straight up doesn't work. In the penultimate chapter, it just straight up didn't work no matter what, from what I found, and I had to like give Marcia a Brave Lance, which luckily she was able to kill them. But like it's very inconsistent. I think it's like most likely there's like probably some priority like in the game that has like some sort of weird number or something that probably goes up or down or something. Yeah, something like that. I don't know how to describe it properly.
Yeah. The way like, I've heard it phrased is that, and I don't think this is entirely accurate, but it's someone said it, is that if an enemy sees Shade on the unit, they will think they can counterattack even if they can't, and vice versa for provoke. That's what I've heard. But I don't know if that's accurate.
It doesn't always do that. Like in some instances where like, oh, Marcia can't kill with a 1 to 2 range weapon. But like for example, like the Sonic Sword strat that I did with Ike in my 100% run, like Shade worked as intended. The ballistas like will sometimes target Marcia on that map, but sometimes they won't. So like there's like this really weird inconsistency, although it could be due to stat rolls. Like I said, it's a very mysterious skill, but it definitely has its uses.
Yeah, would it be fair to sum it up as we don't know for sure, but it changes a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. On Volk, it definitely works as intended. Like in the desert map, for example, I think I had him like grab the boots, and there was like a Raven Laguz that could attack him, but instead of attacking him, I think it just straight up went for Joe, even though like it practically, Joe had the Laguz guard and stuff, so like it actually did its job.
Interesting. All right. But is Volk have Shade or Stillness in this game? Just Shade, right?
Shade. It's just called Shade.
Okay.
So yeah, Shade's a very weird skill. Okay, I haven't gotten it quite down to an exact science, but I think I've at least shown like the weird ways it works. Like enemies randomly friendly firing.
Right, good enough for me. All right, shall we get back to Shinon? So do you think he should move? Because I think the D tier might be okay for him.
Yeah, D tier is fine for him. I definitely think he's more useful than like say Braum or like all the Laguz royals, for example. But I think you can move him next to Gatrie, because I think they're about as useful as like they are like for the time they're around.
Yeah, which is silly because Gatrie's around for much more often than Shinon, but not really, because he's not being deployed a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, that works out. So that's the Grill Mercenaries. We've ended up rounding out with the OG squad and some package deals, I guess, like Mist and Kieran and the others. So I guess next time we can go into the mid game units, and it's probably starting with like, I think Rolf would be up next.
Yeah.
And Marcia.
Oh, Mia too.
Oh, right, Mia. Who cares about Mia, right? I actually forgot Mia, but I don't think we really have time for her. But we'll rag on Mia next time for sure.
Okay.
Seems good.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for joining. It was a very enlightening.
It was
experience.
A pleasure. It was a pleasure.
And we'll see you next time for part 2.
Yeah, and Inui might not have been as crazy as we thought he was.
We went full circle with Aether being Pwnage Incarnate.
We really did.
We're gonna say it anyway. All right, we'll see if he was right about stuff more times next time. Peace. Bye.
Peace.